The morning sun cast blue light across the crystal towers of Zerion Prime. Administrator Zethara stood at her office window, watching the mining crews prepare for another peaceful day. The Kalani people had lived this way for thousands of years. They worked the rich mineral veins deep in their planet's crust, traded with friendly alien races, and never worried about danger from the stars. Zethara's skin sparkled like cut diamonds in the gentle light. All Kalani had this gift from their ancestors. Their crystalline bodies reflected the beauty of their homeworld's twin moons and helped them survive the long, cold nights. But today, something felt wrong. The communication panel on her desk began flashing red. Emergency signals never came to Zerion Prime. Their world sat far from the busy trade routes where pirates might attack merchant ships. They had no enemies, no conflicts with other species. The mining colony existed in perfect peace. Administrator, came the voice of communications, Officer Peldar. His usual calm tone carried a note of fear that made Zethara's crystal skin grow dim. We have urgent reports from Mining Station 7. What kind of reports? Zethara asked, already moving toward her desk. They say something is coming from the rim, something that eats worlds. The words hit Zethara like ice water. She knew the old stories that parents told children on dark nights. Tales of the Vorthak swarm that swept across the galaxy every few centuries, consuming everything in its path. But those were just stories, ancient legends. The Vorthak had not been seen for over 500 years. Put me through to Station 7, she ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing mining foreman Koleth. His usually bright skin had turned gray with terror. Behind him, other Kalani workers crowded around monitoring equipment, their voices high with panic. Administrator, you must see this, Koleth said. Our deep space sensors picked up movement at the galaxy's edge. It's not normal ship traffic, it's massive. Hundreds of objects moving together like a wave. The screen changed to show long-range sensor data. Zethara felt her heart stop. The reading showed a vast cloud of organic matter moving through space at incredible speed. Each object was enormous, larger than the biggest space stations she had ever seen. And there were so many of them that the sensors could not count them all. How long until they reach us? She whispered. At their current speed, 8 days, Koleth replied. Administrator, these readings match the old descriptions. This is the Vorthak swarm. They've returned early. Zethara's hands shook as she switched to the colony's main communication system. The Kalani had always relied on their friends among the stars for protection. The Altarian Federation had powerful ships and kind hearts. The Nexus Collective possessed technology beyond imagination. Surely one of them would help. Send emergency signals to all our allies, she ordered. Tell them we need immediate assistance. Military assistance. For the next 6 hours, Zethara waited as distress calls flashed across the galaxy. The responses came back slowly, and each one broke her heart a little more. The Altarian Federation replied first. We are evacuating our outer colonies. All military vessels are needed for our own defense. We cannot spare any ships. The Nexus Collective sent a longer message, but it said the same thing. Our calculations show the swarm will reach your sector before our fleets can arrive. We must protect our core worlds. We are sorry. One by one, every major civilization gave the same answer. The peaceful species that had traded with Zerion Prime for generations were all running. They were pulling back to their strongest worlds and leaving the outer colonies to face the Vorthak alone. What about the Zephyrian Council? Asked Chief Science Officer Veloth. They have the fastest ships in known space. Zethara shook her head. The Zephyrians had already answered. Their exact words were, the Vorthak cannot be fought, they can only be survived. Save who you can, and abandon your world. As night fell over Zerion Prime, Zethara stood before the colony's emergency council. 50 Kalani leaders filled the crystal chamber, their faces reflecting fear and confusion. These were people who had never faced a real crisis. Their biggest problems had always been equipment failures or trade disputes. We have 3 choices, Zethara announced. We can try to evacuate everyone to the inner systems. We can stay and hope our automated defenses can hold off the swarm. Or we can keep sending distress calls and pray someone answers. Elder Mordan, the oldest Kalani on the planet, spoke up. How many ships do we have for evacuation? 12 cargo vessels and 30 mining shuttles, Veloth replied. They could carry maybe 2,000 people. We have over 50,000 colonists. The chamber fell silent. Everyone understood the math. Even if they started evacuating immediately, most of the colony would be left behind. And where would they go? Every safe world was already overwhelmed with refugees. Our defense systems? Asked another council member. Automated asteroid deflectors and mining laser arrays, Veloth said. They're designed to clear debris, not fight a war. Against the Vorthak, they would be useless. Zethara felt the weight of 50,000 lives pressing down on her crystal shoulders. She had been chosen to lead because she was good at organizing mining operations and trade agreements. No one had ever expected her to face the end of the world. We keep sending distress calls, she decided. Broadcast on all frequencies. Maybe there's someone out there we haven't contacted yet. Someone who will help. Through the long night, the communication array sent the same message over and over. This is Administrator Zethara of Zerion Prime. We are a peaceful mining colony under threat from the Vorthak swarm. We have 50,000 civilians and no military capability. We need immediate assistance. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need help. The message raced through hyperspace, reaching dozens of star systems. But everywhere it went, the answer was the same. The galaxy's civilized species were in full retreat. No one had ships to spare for a distant mining world. Dawn broke over Zerion Prime for what might be the last time. The Kalani went about their morning routines, but everyone knew that normal life was ending. Parents held their children closer. Workers stared up at the sky, wondering when death would fall from the stars. Zethara had not slept. She sat in her office, still sending distress calls to any frequency that might carry them to friendly ears. Her crystal skin had grown dim with exhaustion and despair. Then something impossible happened. The communication panel flashed green, an incoming message from deep space. But the signal was not coming from any known system. The transmission markers showed origin coordinates that were not in any star chart the Kalani possessed. Zethara's hands trembled as she opened the channel. A voice came through the speakers, speaking in a language she had never heard but somehow understood through the universal translator. Zerion Prime, this is the United Earth Ship Defender. We received your distress call. My name is Captain Jake Morrison of the human species. Help is on the way. Repeat, help is on the way. The voice was strong and confident. It carried the tone of someone who had faced danger before and was not afraid. Zethara stared at the communication panel in shock. Humans. She had never heard of them. They were not in any database of known species. Captain Morrison, she managed to say, this is Administrator Zethara. Are you saying you will help us? Do you understand the danger? The Vorthak swarm is coming. We understand, Morrison replied. We've analyzed your transmission and the threat data you included. We have one ship in your area, but we're coming to help. Our estimated arrival time is 3 days. 3 days. The swarm would not reach Zerion Prime for 8 days. These mysterious humans would arrive in time. Zethara felt something she had not experienced in days. Hope. Captain Morrison, she said, you should know that no other species will help us. They all say the Vorthak cannot be fought. There was a pause. Then Morrison's voice came back and Zethara heard something in it that made her crystal skin brighten. It was the sound of someone who disagreed completely. Administrator Zethara, Morrison said, where we come from, everything can be fought. We'll see you in 3 days. 3 days passed like a dream for the people of Zerion Prime. The Kalani went about their daily tasks, but everyone kept looking at the sky. They were waiting for their mysterious saviors to arrive. No one knew what to expect from these humans. Zethara spent most of her time studying the limited data her scientists had gathered about the approaching ship. The vessel called itself the UES Defender, but their sensors could not get clear readings on it. The ship seemed to be made of metal and strange materials that the Kalani had never seen before. It's not like any design in our databases, Chief Science Officer Veloth reported. The Altarians build their ships from living coral that grows in space. The Nexus Collective uses pure energy formed into solid shapes. But this human ship appears to be constructed from refined metals. What does that tell us about them? Zathara asked. Veloth's crystal skin flickered with uncertainty. It suggests they come from a world with heavy industry. They mine raw materials and shape them into tools, very different from our more elegant methods. On the morning of the third day, space above Zerion Prime suddenly twisted like water. The human ship dropped out of hyperspace in a flash of blue light that made every Kalani on the planet look up in wonder. The UES Defender hung in orbit like a metal mountain, its hull reflecting the light of their sun. Zathara's first look at the ship through the colony's main telescope made her step backward in surprise. The human vessel was covered in what could only be weapons. Strange tubes and angular projections stuck out from its hull in every direction. The ship looked like it had been built for one purpose only: fighting. By the twin moons, whispered Veloth. What kind of people build ships that look like that? The kind that answered our distress call when no one else would, Zathara replied. But she felt a chill of fear mixed with her hope. What manner of beings were these humans? Captain Morrison's voice came through the communication system an hour later. Administrator Zathara, this is Captain Morrison. We request permission to beam 2 of your representatives aboard our ship for first contact discussions. Zathara had never heard the word beam used that way before. Captain Morrison, could you explain what you mean by beam? We'll transport you directly from your location to our ship using matter displacement technology, Morrison explained. It's perfectly safe. We use it all the time. The Kalani had matter transporters too, but they only used them for moving cargo short distances. The idea of transporting living beings through space seemed dangerous. But Zathara knew they had no choice. If they wanted the humans' help, they had to trust them. Very well, Captain Morrison. Myself and Chief Science Officer Veloth will come aboard your vessel. Minutes later, Zathara felt a strange tingling sensation wash over her body. The world around her dissolved into sparkles of light. When her vision cleared, she was standing in a room unlike anything she had ever seen. The chamber was made of gray metal walls covered in blinking lights and strange symbols. The air hummed with the sound of powerful machinery. Everything looked hard and functional, built to last rather than to please the eye. After the gentle curves and crystal beauty of Kalani architecture, the human ship felt harsh and cold. Welcome aboard the UES Defender, said a voice behind them. Zathara turned and got her first look at a human being. Captain Jake Morrison was shorter than most Kalani, but much broader and more muscular. His skin was a warm brown color and thick dark hair covered the top of his head. But what struck her most were his eyes. They were set forward in his skull like a predator's, designed for focusing on prey. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us, Morrison said, stepping forward with his hand extended. This is a historic moment. First contact between our species. Zathara carefully reached out and touched Morrison's hand with her crystal fingers. The human's skin was warm and soft, but she could feel the strength in his grip. These beings were physically powerful in ways the Kalani had never needed to be. Captain Morrison, she said, may I present Chief Science Officer Veloth? We are grateful that you answered our distress call. Morrison nodded and gestured toward a doorway. Let me introduce you to my senior staff. We have a lot to discuss. They followed the captain through corridors filled with the constant sound of machinery. Zathara noticed that everything on the ship seemed designed for efficiency rather than comfort. The lights were bright and harsh. The floors were made of metal plates that rang under their feet. Even the walls had a military appearance, covered with panels and displays that showed information about the ship's systems. The briefing room was a large chamber dominated by a metal table surrounded by chairs. 3 more humans waited inside, and Zathara studied them carefully. They were all built like Morrison, sturdy and strong, but each one was different. This is Commander Lisa Park, my first officer, Morrison said, indicating a woman with short black hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. Lieutenant Colonel Sam Davis, our Marine commander. Davis was a large man with scars on his hands and a way of standing that suggested he was ready for trouble. And Dr. Amy Carter, our xenobiologist. Dr. Carter stepped forward with a smile that seemed genuine. It's wonderful to meet you both. I've been studying your transmissions, and your species appears to have fascinating adaptations to your homeworld's environment. Veloth's crystal skin brightened with interest. You study alien life forms? Among other things, Carter replied. We've been preparing for first contact with other species for many years. We hoped it would happen under better circumstances. Morrison activated a holographic display above the table. Let's talk about your situation. Show us everything you know about this Vorthak swarm. For the next hour, Zathara and Veloth explained the threat facing their world. They showed the humans sensor data of the approaching bioships, historical records of previous Vorthak attacks, and tactical information about how the swarm operated. The humans listened with an intensity that surprised the Kalani visitors. They asked detailed questions that no other species had bothered to ask. How fast could the bioships change direction? What kind of weapons did they use? How did they coordinate their attacks across such large numbers? You're asking about military tactics, Veloth observed. The other species we contacted focused on evacuation plans. Lieutenant Colonel Davis leaned forward. Because evacuation isn't always possible. Sometimes you have to stand and fight. But the Vorthak have never been defeated in battle, Zathara protested. They're too numerous, too powerful. That's why all the civilized worlds are retreating. Commander Park exchanged a look with Morrison. Tell us about these civilized worlds. What kind of military forces do they have? Zathara described the fleets of their various allies. The Altarian Federation had beautiful ships that could travel faster than light and fire beams of pure energy. The Nexus Collective possessed vessels that could bend space and time. The Zephyrian Council commanded fleets of crystal ships that moved like schools of fish. Impressive technology, Morrison admitted. But what about ground forces, planetary defenses, weapons designed specifically for ship-to-ship combat? The Kalani visitors looked at each other in confusion. We don't understand, Veloth said. Why would anyone need such things? Before the Vorthak, there were no major wars in this part of the galaxy. We trade and explore and learn from each other. Dr. Carter spoke up gently. That's beautiful, and I wish more places could be like that. But where we come from, peace has to be defended. Sometimes the only way to protect innocent people is to be better at fighting than the ones who want to hurt them. Morrison stood and walked to a wall display that showed tactical information about the Defender. Our ship might not be as elegant as your friend's vessels, but it was designed for one purpose: to fight and win against overwhelming odds. You really think you can defeat the Vorthak swarm? Zathara asked. With one ship. We won't know until we try, Morrison replied. But I can promise you this. When they get here, they're going to find out that humans don't run from bullies. We run toward them. Sam Davis activated another display showing the colony's surface. Tell us about your mining operations. How deep do your tunnels go? What kind of equipment do you have for moving large amounts of material? Why do you ask? Veloth wanted to know. Because if we're going to defend your world, Davis said, we need to know every advantage we can get. Your mining tunnels could provide shelter for civilians. Your equipment might be useful for other purposes. Zathara felt a chill as she realized what the human was suggesting. You're planning to fight them on the planet's surface as well as in space? Morrison nodded. We fight them everywhere, Administrator. That's how you win against an enemy that thinks it's unstoppable. You show them they're wrong. As the meeting continued, Zathara began to understand that she was dealing with a completely different kind of species. The humans thought about problems in ways that no other civilized race considered. Where others saw impossible odds, humans saw tactical challenges. Where others planned retreat, humans prepared for battle. Captain Morrison, she said finally, I have to ask, why are you willing to risk your lives for strangers? Your ship could leave this system and be safe. Why stay and fight for people you've never met? The work began before dawn the next morning. Commander Lisa Park materialized in the center of Zarian Prime's main settlement with a team of human engineers. The Kalani colonists gathered to watch as these strange beings began examining their World with the eyes of soldiers. We need to see your deepest mining tunnels, Park told Administrator Zethara, and we need to understand how your power systems work. Zethara led the humans through the colony's underground network. The colony had spent decades carving tunnels deep into their planet's crust, following veins of precious crystals. The passages were smooth and beautiful, carved with artistic care as well as practical purpose. Park ran her hand along the tunnel walls. These are well made. How deep do they go? The lowest levels reach nearly 2 kilometers below the surface. Mining foreman, Koleth explained. We have 17 major tunnel systems connected by transport tubes. The human commander nodded and spoke into a small device attached to her uniform. Morrison, the underground network is better than we hoped. We can shelter the entire population. If we reinforce the main passages, Captain Morrison's voice crackled back through the communicator. Good. What about defensive positions? Several tunnel entrances have clear sightlines to the surface. We could set up firing positions there. Park looked at the confused Kaylani around her. With their permission, of course. Zethara felt a chill. You want to turn our mining colony into a fortress? We want to turn it into a place where your people can survive, Park replied gently. The Vorthak will come to the surface first. When they do, we need to be ready for them. While Park's team worked underground, Lieutenant Colonel Sam Davis began the impossible task of preparing the colony for war. He gathered volunteers in the colony's main meeting hall and looked at the crowd of peaceful miners and scientists who had never held a weapon in their lives. I'm not going to try to turn you into soldiers, Davis told them honestly. You're not built for combat and we don't have time for proper training. But I can teach you how to help when the fighting starts. Davis showed the volunteers how to set up emergency medical stations and coordinate evacuation procedures. He taught them to recognize the sound of weapons fire and how to move civilians quickly through the tunnel systems. Most importantly, he taught them not to panic. Fear will kill you faster than any enemy, he explained to a group that included teachers, engineers, and shopkeepers. When the attack comes, some of you will want to run. Some will want to hide. That's natural. But if you can stay calm and follow the plan, we can save lives. Young Kalani named Bentar raised his crystal hand. What if the humans can't stop the Vorthak? What if your ship is destroyed? Davis was quiet for a moment. Then we make sure the Vorthak pay a price they'll never forget. And we make sure your people survive to rebuild. The human marine's honesty impressed the Kalani volunteers. He did not promise easy victory or tell them everything would be fine. He simply promised that the humans would fight to the end. Meanwhile, Dr. Amy Carter worked with Kalani scientists in their research laboratories. She studied every piece of data they had collected about the Vorthak over the centuries. The bioships were massive creatures that had evolved in the empty spaces between galaxies. They fed on organic matter and reproduced by consuming entire planets. They're not really ships at all, Carter explained to Chief Science Officer Veloth. They're living creatures. Each one is like a single cell in a massive organism. How does that help us fight them? Veloth asked. Carter pointed to biological scans of Vorthak tissue samples that had been collected after previous attacks. Living. Things have weaknesses. They need specific conditions to survive. They can be poisoned, infected, or disrupted. Together, the human and Kalani scientists began working on ways to exploit these weaknesses. Carter's knowledge of biology combined with Veloth's understanding of the Vorthak's behavior patterns led to several promising ideas. But the most dramatic preparations were happening in space above Zarian Prime. Captain Morrison had moved the HUES Defender into a high orbit where it could monitor all approaches to the planet. The ship's weapon systems were charging, and its crew was running constant combat drills. On the planet's surface, human engineers worked alongside Kalani technicians to modify the colony's mining equipment. Heavy industrial lasers that were used to cut through rock could be reconfigured to fire at enemy targets. Massive excavation machines could be turned into mobile defense platforms. Your mining charges are particularly interesting, Commander Park told Zethara as they watched the work progress. How much explosive force can you generate? Enough to collapse an entire mountain if necessary, Zethara replied. But surely, you don't intend to destroy our own world? Park's expression was grim. If the choice is between a destroyed world and a consumed world, which would you choose? The question hung in the air like a cold wind. Zethara realized that these humans were prepared to make terrible choices to save her people. They thought about war in ways that peaceful species could never imagine. As the days passed, the colony transformed. Tunnel entrances were reinforced with metal barriers that the humans called hardpoints. Emergency shelters were stocked with food, water, and medical supplies. Communication lines were run throughout the underground network so that every section could stay in contact with the command center. The Kalani watched in amazement as their peaceful mining world became a fortress. But they also began to understand that the humans were giving them something precious: hope. For the first time since the Vorthak threat had appeared, the colonists believed they might survive. Not everyone was comfortable with the changes. Elder, Morden approached Zethara on the 4th day of preparations. Are we doing the right thing, he asked. Perhaps we should evacuate while we still can. To where? Zethara replied. Every safe world is already overwhelmed with refugees, and even if we could leave, what about all the other colonies that will face the swarm after us? Mordan's crystal. Skin grew dim with worry. But these humans fight like they enjoy violence. What if we're making a deal with creatures as dangerous as the Vorthak? Zethara had wondered the same thing, but she had spent days watching the humans work. She saw how gently Dr. Carter treated injured Kalani workers. She watched Commander Park risk her own safety to reinforce tunnel sections that would only protect civilians. She listened to Lieutenant Colonel Davis speak with quiet respect about the courage of Kalani volunteers. They're not violent because they enjoy it, she told Mordan. They're violent because someone has to be. They've made themselves into weapons so that people like us can remain peaceful. On the evening before the Vorthak were expected to arrive, Captain Morrison called a meeting of all senior personnel. Humans and Kalani gathered in the colony's main conference room to review the final battle plans. Morrison stood before a tactical display showing Xerion Prime and the surrounding space. The swarm will drop out of hyperspace here, he said, pointing to coordinates at the edge of the system. They'll move toward the planet in a standard consumption formation. That gives us maybe 6 hours from detection to surface contact. What about the Defender? Asked Veloth. We'll engage them in space first, Morrison replied. Our job is to disrupt their formation and buy time for the surface defenses. We can't stop them all, but we can make sure only a fraction reach the planet. Lieutenant Colonel Davis took over the briefing. When they do reach the surface, they'll spread out to consume as much organic matter as possible. That's when we hit them with everything we have. Mining lasers, explosive charges, and some surprises Dr. Carter has prepared. Dr. Carter smiled, grimly. I've been working with your scientists to create biological weapons specifically designed to disrupt Vorthak physiology. We can't kill them all, but we can make them very sick. And if all of that fails? Elder Mordan asked. Morrison's expression was hard as stone. Then we trigger the mining charges and bring down the entire tunnel system. Better a dead world than a consumed one. The room fell silent. Every Kalani understood what the captain was saying. The humans were prepared to destroy Xerion Prime to deny it to the enemy. It was a level of tactical thinking that no peaceful species would ever consider. But it was also proof of how seriously the humans took their promise to help. They would rather see the world destroyed than allow the Vorthak to use it as fuel for their next attack. As the meeting ended, Zethara walked outside to look at the stars one last time before the battle began. The night sky was beautiful and peaceful, showing no sign of the horror racing toward them through hyperspace. Commander Park joined her in the quiet darkness. Scared? The human asked. Terrified, Zethara admitted, but also grateful. Without you, we would be facing this alone. Park nodded. You're not alone anymore. Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together. Above them, the UES Defender moved across the star field, like a guardian angel made of metal and weapons. In a few hours, It would be time to find out if the humans' promise of protection was stronger than the Vorthak's hunger for destruction. The Vorthak swarm arrived 2 hours ahead of schedule, dropping out of hyperspace like a nightmare made real. Space above Xerion Prime suddenly filled with massive bioships that blotted out the stars. Each creature was the size of a city, their organic hulls pulsing with alien life. Administrator Zethara watched from the colony's command center as hundreds of the monsters emerged from the twisted space around them. The sight made her crystal skin grow pale with terror. No amount of preparation could have readied her for the sheer scale of the swarm. "By the twin moons," whispered Chief Science Officer Veloth. "There are so many of them." Captain Morrison's voice crackled through the communication system from the UES Defender. "All stations, this is Morrison. The party has started early. Surface teams, get everyone underground now." In the tunnels beneath Xerion Prime, Lieutenant Colonel Sam Davis began the largest evacuation in Kalani history. 50,000 colonists moved through the reinforced passages like water flowing downhill. The humans had trained them well. There was fear, but no panic. "Move quickly, but stay calm," Davis called out as families hurried past carrying emergency supplies. "Remember what we practiced. The deeper you go, the safer you'll be." Above ground, Commander Lisa Park led the final preparations of the surface defenses. Mining lasers swiveled toward the sky. Explosive charges were armed and ready. Every human and Kalani volunteer took their assigned positions. "All surface teams report ready status," Park commanded. One by one, the defensive positions confirmed they were prepared. Former miners now crouched behind improvised barriers, operating weapons they had learned to use in just a few days. It should have been hopeless. It should have been suicide. But the humans had taught them something the Kalani had never learned before. Sometimes you fight, not because you can win, but because someone has to try. In space, the UES Defender raced toward the center of the Vorthak formation. The single human ship looked tiny against the massive bio-creatures surrounding it, like a metal arrow flying into a storm cloud. "Weapons status?" Morrison asked his crew. "All railguns charged and ready," reported Lieutenant Commander Tony Williams from the weapons station. "Point defense systems online. We have enough ammunition for approximately 12 minutes of continuous fire." "Then we better make those 12 minutes count," Morrison replied. "All hands, battle stations. Let's show these things what happens when they threaten innocent people." The Defender opened fire as it entered weapons range. Tungsten slugs accelerated to incredible speeds. Magnetic rails slammed into the nearest bioships. The weapons struck with the force of small meteors, tearing massive holes in organic hulls. The Vorthak creatures reacted immediately. Smaller organisms launched from their bodies like living missiles, swarming toward the human ship. Acid sprayed from organic weapons trying to dissolve the Defender's metal armor. Morrison's crew responded with the precision of a machine built for war. Point defense lasers filled space with deadly light, destroying the smaller attackers before they could reach the ship. Explosive shells detonated among the swarm, clearing paths through the organic fighters. "Hard to port," Morrison commanded. "Use the planet's gravity to break up their formation." Commander Park piloted the Defender through impossible maneuvers, diving toward Xerion Prime's atmosphere and then pulling up at the last moment. The bioships tried to follow, but their massive size made them slow to change direction. The human ship danced between the creatures like a fighter avoiding the clumsy swings of giants. Every time the Vorthak tried to surround the Defender, Morrison's crew found a way to slip through their trap and strike from an unexpected angle. But there were too many of them. For every bioship the humans destroyed, 5 more took its place. Slowly, inevitably, the swarm began to overwhelm the lone Defender. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported the ship's engineer. "We're losing atmosphere in sections 12 through 15. "Seal those areas and reroute life support," Morrison ordered. "How much ammunition do we have left?" 6 minutes of continuous fire, Williams replied. Morrison made a decision that would have shocked any other species in the galaxy. Instead of retreating to preserve his ship and crew, he ordered an attack directly into the heart of the swarm. "All power to weapons and engines," he commanded. "We're going right through the middle of them." The Defender accelerated toward the largest concentration of bioships, its weapons firing continuously. The ship carved a path of destruction through the swarm, but the damage it suffered grew worse with each passing second. On the planet's surface, the first Vorthak creatures began their descent through the atmosphere. They fell like meteors, their organic hulls glowing with heat as they prepared to consume everything they found. "Here they come," Commander Park announced over the communication system. "All teams, wait for my signal." The bio-creatures landed, in the fields around the colony, their massive forms crushing buildings and equipment. Immediately they began extending feeding tendrils toward any organic matter they could detect. "Now," Park commanded. The modified mining lasers opened fire simultaneously, sending beams of focused energy into the alien monsters. The weapons burned through organic armor and struck vital organs deep inside the creatures. Several bioships writhed in pain and began to retreat, but more kept landing. The Kalani volunteers at the weapon stations worked frantically to reload and retarget their equipment. They had never been soldiers, but desperation made them brave. In the deepest tunnels beneath the colony, Dr. Amy Carter activated her secret weapon. She had spent days working with Kalani scientists to create a biological virus specifically designed to attack Vorthak physiology. "Release the countermeasure," she ordered. Vents throughout the tunnel system opened, releasing clouds of microscopic organisms into the air. The biovirus was harmless to Kalani and humans, but deadly to anything with Vorthak genetic markers. The effects were immediate. Bio-creatures on the surface began to show signs of infection. Their movements became sluggish. Their feeding tendrils withdrew. Some of the smaller organisms simply collapsed and stopped moving. "It's working," Carter reported to Morrison through the communication link. "The bioweapon is disrupting their nervous systems." In space, Morrison received the good news just as his ship suffered critical damage. A massive bioship had managed to grab the Defender with organic tentacles, pulling the human vessel toward its feeding mouth. "We're caught," Commander Park reported. "Engines are offline. That thing is trying to consume us." Morrison looked at his crew and saw the same determination in their eyes that had brought them across the galaxy to help strangers. They were not going to give up, even facing certain death. "Dr. Carter," Morrison called down to the planet, "can you boost that bioweapon signal?" "If I route it through the ship's communication array, yes," Carter replied. "But it would require someone to manually adjust the frequency from inside the array chamber." "Do it," Morrison ordered. Then he turned to his communications officer. "Send that biofrequency through our main transmitter. Maximum power." The young officer hesitated. "Sir, channeling that much power through the communication system will overload it. We'll lose all contact with the surface." "Then we better make this count," Morrison replied. The UES Defender's communication array became a massive transmitter, broadcasting Dr. Carter's bioweapon across the entire star system. The signal reached every Vorthak creature simultaneously, overloading their shared nervous system with deadly information. The results were devastating for the swarm. Bioships that had been coordinating their attack suddenly turned on each other. Creatures that had been moving in perfect formation began attacking anything that moved. The disciplined invasion became chaos. The bioship holding the Defender released its grip and began thrashing wildly, trying to escape from enemies that existed only in its infected mind. Morrison's crew used the opportunity to break free and retreat to a safe distance. On the planet's surface, the remaining Vorthak creatures fled toward space, their biological programming telling them to escape the infected area. The few that stayed were quickly destroyed by the colony's defensive weapons. As the immediate danger passed, Zethara emerged from the tunnels to survey the damage. The surface of Zirion Prime was scarred and broken, but it was still their world. The Kalani had survived. "Captain Morrison," she called through the communication system. "The surface is secure. The creatures are retreating." Morrison's voice came back weak but victorious. "Glad to hear it, Administrator. Though I think we're going to need some help getting home. That last trick did a number on our ship." Looking up at the stars, Zethara saw the scattered remains of the Vorthak swarm fleeing toward deep space. The creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries had been defeated by a single human ship. and the courage of people who refused to give up. The Battle of Zerion Prime was over. The Deathworlders had kept their promise. The morning after the battle, Zerion Prime looked like a different world. Smoke still rose from craters where Vorthak bioships had crashed and burned. The crystal towers of the main colony were cracked and scarred, but they still stood proud. Against the blue sky, Administrator Zethara walked through the damaged streets with Chief Science Officer Veloth, surveying what remained of their peaceful mining world. The scars were deep, but they were scars of survival, not destruction. "How many did we lose?" Zethara asked quietly. 47 colonists, Veloth replied, his crystal skin dim with sadness. "Most died when the first bioships landed before. We could get everyone underground, it could have been so much worse." Zethara nodded. 47 lives lost was a tragedy, but 50,000 saved was a miracle. Without the humans, every soul on Zerion Prime would have been consumed by the swarm. In orbit above them, the UES Defender hung like a wounded bird. The human ship had suffered massive damage during the battle. Its hull was torn open in several places, and many of its systems were offline. But it was still there, still protecting them. "Administrator Zethara," came Captain Morrison's voice, through the repaired communication system. "We're ready to receive visitors if you'd like to come aboard." An hour later, Zethara and a delegation of Kalani leaders materialized in the Defender's damaged briefing room. The chamber that had looked so impressive during first contact now showed the cost of battle. Burn marks scarred the walls, and several control panels had been destroyed by enemy fire. Captain Morrison stood to greet them, but Zethara could see that he was injured. His left arm was in a medical support device, and there were bandages on his forehead. Around the room, other human crew members showed similar signs of the fight they had endured. "Captain Morrison," Zethara said formally, "the people of Zerion Prime owe you a debt that can never be repaid. You saved our world." Morrison shook his head. "We all saved your world. Your people showed incredible courage. Many of our tactics only worked because Kalani volunteers were willing to risk their lives operating unfamiliar equipment." Dr. Amy Carter entered the briefing room, her medical coat stained with the evidence of treating wounded crew members. "Administrator, I wanted to update you on our analysis of the bioweapons' effectiveness." "Please, Doctor," Zethara replied. Carter activated a holographic display showing the retreating Vorthak swarm. "The virus we created appears to have permanent effects on their nervous systems. The creatures that survived are carrying the infection back to the main swarm body. This could protect other worlds for years to come." The implications were staggering. The humans had not just saved Zerion Prime, they had potentially broken the Vorthak's ability to coordinate large-scale attacks across the galaxy. "How is this possible?" asked Elder Mordan, who had joined the delegation despite his earlier doubts about working with the humans. "We studied their biology and found their weakness," Carter explained simply. "Every species has vulnerabilities. Even the most dangerous predators can be stopped if you understand how they work." Commander Lisa Park joined the discussion, moving carefully due to injuries sustained when the ship had been grabbed by the bio-creature. "The real question is what happens next. Word of this victory will spread across the galaxy. Other species will want to know how we defeated the Vorthak." Morrison looked thoughtful. "That brings up an important topic. Administrator, we need to discuss the future relationship between our species." Zethara had been thinking about the same thing. "Captain Morrison, I have a formal request from the Kalani Colonial Council. We would like to invite humanity to join a new defensive alliance. Our people and others like us need protectors who understand that sometimes peace must be defended with strength." The human captain was quiet for a long moment. "With respect, Administrator, that's not what we want." The statement shocked every Kalani in the room. "You don't want to help other species?" Veloth asked in confusion. "We want to help," Morrison clarified. "But we don't want to be your permanent guardians. That's not healthy for anyone." Dr. Carter stepped forward. "What Captain Morrison means is that we'd rather teach you to defend yourselves. Dependence on others for protection makes you vulnerable. but knowledge and capability make you truly safe. Morrison activated a new display showing star charts of the local galactic region. Here's what we propose. We establish joint training facilities where human military advisors work with your scientists and engineers. We teach you to convert civilian technology into defensive systems. We show you how to coordinate multi-species defense networks. You want to turn us into warriors like yourselves? Elder Mordon asked with concern. No, Commander Park replied firmly. We want to give you the tools to remain peaceful by choice, not because you have no other option. Lieutenant Colonel Sam Davis, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. War should always be the last choice, but it should be a choice you can make. Right now, species like yours can only run or surrender when threatened. We want to give you a third option. The concept was revolutionary. None of the galaxy's peaceful civilizations had ever considered that they might learn to fight for themselves. They had always relied on others for protection, or simply accepted that some threats were too great to resist. What would this alliance look like in practice? Zathura asked. Morrison outlined the human proposal. Earth would provide military, advisors, and defensive technology to any species that requested help. In return, those species would share their own expertise in science, medicine, and engineering. The alliance would be built on mutual benefit, not dependence. We call it the Terran Defense Initiative, Morrison explained. The goal is to create a galaxy where peaceful species can remain peaceful because they're strong enough to defend their choices. Dr. Carter added, Your mining laser modifications worked so well because you understood the technology. Our weapons training was effective because we taught your people to think tactically. When you combine human military knowledge with alien scientific expertise, the results are powerful. Over the following days, delegations from other species began arriving at Xerion Prime. Word of the Vorthak defeat had spread through hyperspace, communications faster than anyone expected. The Altarian Federation sent observers. The Nexus Collective dispatched a science team. Even the proud Zephyrian Council sent representatives to learn how the impossible had been accomplished. Each delegation had the same questions. How had one human ship defeated a force that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia? What technologies had made the victory possible? And most importantly, could the techniques be shared? The humans answered every question honestly. They demonstrated. Their weapons technology explained their tactical thinking, and shared Dr. Carter's biological research freely. But they also made clear that technology alone had not won the battle. Courage won this fight, Morrison told a gathering of alien representatives. The courage of Kalani volunteers who operated weapons they'd never seen before. The courage of civilians who trusted us enough to hide underground while we fought above them. The courage of everyone who chose to stand and fight instead of running away. As the meetings continued, a pattern emerged. The peaceful species of the galaxy were tired of being afraid. They wanted to learn how to protect themselves, their families, and their worlds. The human victory had shown them that even the most terrifying enemies could be defeated. The Terran Defense Initiative was formally established 2 weeks after the battle. The first joint training facility would be built on Xerion Prime, with human advisors working alongside scientists from dozens of species. The mining colony that had nearly been destroyed would become the birthplace of a new age in galactic defense. But perhaps the most important change was philosophical. The galaxy's peaceful civilizations were learning a lesson that humanity had known for millennia. Sometimes the best way to preserve peace is to be prepared for war. As Captain Morrison prepared to depart for Earth to report on first contact, Administrator Zathara stood with him one last time in the Defender's damaged briefing room. Captain Morrison, she said, when we sent out that distress call, we expected help from our friends. We never imagined that strangers would risk everything to save us. Morrison smiled, and for the first time since arriving at Xerion Prime, he looked truly relaxed. Administrator, after what we've been through together, we're not strangers anymore, we're allies. And allies look out for each other. 3 months later, the first class of Kalani defense specialists graduated from the new training facility. They had learned to convert mining equipment into weapon systems, to coordinate planetary defenses, and to think strategically about protecting their worlds. When the next Vorthak probe ship appeared at the edge of Kalani space, it found something unprecedented. Instead of defenseless miners sending desperate pleas for help, it discovered a fortified world with trained defenders and advanced weapons. The probe ship retreated without attacking. Word spread through the Vorthak collective consciousness that Zarian Prime was no longer easy prey. The miners had learned to bite back. Administrator Zathara, now also holding the title of defense coordinator, watched the probe ship flee and smiled. The galaxy had changed forever. The age of helpless victims was ending.